Well, good morning. It's my pleasure to host our panel discussion this morning on SMRs. A lot about just transition over the past couple of days and advancing technologies to help with that transition. And small modular reactors are going to be a big part of the solution. So we're really pleased to have as panelists, and joining me today is Erin Polka, who is Vice President Communications for Moltex Energy, and Bill Labbe, who is President and CEO of ARC Energy. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you were able to come, and we've had a few discussions over the past few weeks. And maybe we can start with you, Bill. I mean, we talk about SMRs and their application and lots of discussion around SMRs, but this is a pan-Canadian initiative. Correct? So,
yes.
So maybe you could share with our audience, the video was very informative, SMR 101, about the different applications, but there's also some regional implications for how SMRs are going to roll out.
Yeah, a little bit of the history is that back in 2017, 2018, NRCan put together what I would call the SMR roadmap. And that was really the start of where we go in a pan-Canadian approach. And so there might be a slide here that we can show that talks about how this came together since 2017. So NRCan led it. 2017, they put together a roadmap. And then the way this really developed was looking across Canada, how can SMRs really support what is needed from an energy infrastructure? And that developed from a roadmap into a plan. That plan looked at the different ways that the technology could be deployed. So we kind of bundled that up in a kind of a nuclear approach where we looked at different streams. So you'll see a stream 1 technology that's really led by OPG. And it's really looking at the marketplace, what could be deployed as quickly as possible. So they have a plan to deploy a 300 megawatt unit at Darlington. That is well underway. Construction of that is going to start relatively soon. So they are deep into the execution of that. Stream 2 is looking at advanced SMRs. So we call it the ASMR. And SMRs are typically of the size of 300 megawatts or less. And these are, it's called a Generation 4 design. And really it takes technology that's been played in nuclear space for many years, advances it for commercial use. And so that brings together some inherent safety that was done in that advanced technology. So Stream 2, led by New Brunswick Power, and that's really deploying some inherent safety characteristics that are really that leading technology, that leading edge. And then Stream 3 is really led by the marketplace. Those are smaller reactors, much more mobile, 10 megawatts or less, and looking to really place those in remote areas that are hard to get to either from a grid interconnect or from a technology space that doesn't lend itself to SMRs. And that will be a place where it's remote and they still have a lot of energy infrastructure needs. And so that's really the 3 streams that led to a provincial arrangement of getting the 4 provinces together. The 4 provinces worked on a memorandum of understanding, and that's that collaboration, pan-Canadian. How can we deploy this technology across Canada? And it's really matured to where we are today.
Right, and those 4 provinces are Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick. Right, so that's the pan-Canadian influence for sure. Erin, tell us a little bit about Moltex and what you do there and what Moltex SMR is all about.
Yeah, so Moltex is one of the 2 Stream 2 reactors. Moltex is one, ARC is the other. Moltex was founded in the UK in 2014, and in 2018 we were selected by MB Power from about 100 different applications. They selected 2, our 2 companies, to develop our technology in the region with the goal of commercial operation next to their existing CANDU plant. And Moltex is actually working on 3 technologies. We have a small modular reactor. It's a 300 megawatt molten salt reactor. What makes our reactor a little more unique is that it doesn't burn uranium, which is typical of most reactors, all reactors at this point. What we're doing is we're taking spent CANDU fuel, recycling it, and using that to fuel our reactor. So that's our reactor. We also have a waste recycling facility, so that's where we physically take spent CANDU fuel, put it through a series of chemical processes to create the fuel that's suitable for our reactor. And then in tandem, we're developing what's called grid reserve, which is essentially thermal energy storage tanks. And that's going to enable us to complement intermittent renewables. It's basically heat storage, similar to what you'd see in the solar industry. We'd be able to store energy when it isn't needed on the grid, when the sun's shining, the wind's blowing, and then dispatch much higher quantities when there's periods of higher demand. So for example, our 300 megawatt reactor can provide 900 megawatts of electricity for short periods of time. And that sort of allows us to, nuclear traditionally has been a base load power source, but the way that we're proposing to do it, we can be that base load and that dispatchable source of energy.
Right, so it helped with peak requirements for energy as well, because you can kind of ramp it up and ramp it down.
Yeah. So it's renewables have always been backed up by gas. So this is really an alternative to gas.
And the other thing that strikes me about the Moltex model is, we talk often, and we're very supportive of the nuclear industry and the building trades, of course, but if there's any one criticism, it's always, what happens to the nuclear waste? And so, here's an example with Moltex, where it's a very sustainable solution to help with that nuclear waste question, isn't it?
Yeah, in the nuclear industry, we kind of joke that waste is the industry's Achilles heel. And not because it's necessarily a big issue. In reality, it's quite a manageable issue, but it's a social issue more than anything. And so what we're proposing to do is kind of address that social issue. Right now, there's a plan in Canada to store the waste deep underground. And it's a very viable plan. It's scientifically sound, but it's very expensive. And so by recycling waste and thereby reducing it, we can also reduce the cost of storing that long-term waste. And so that's very attractive. Well, from a social point of view, it's attractive because we're minimizing high-level radioactive waste. But from a waste owner perspective, it's also very attractive because we're essentially reducing their waste liabilities. Over the course of their reactor lifetime, they're saving up money for the eventual disposal of their waste. But if we can reduce it, we can reduce their liabilities.
Great. So, Bill, tell me a little bit about your role in ARC Energy.
We are developing a deployment plan with New Brunswick Power to put 4 units at the Point Lepreau site starting at the end of the decade. And it's the project right now is in an engineering and regulatory phase, and it's for the next couple of years, I call it's a bit of a ghost. It's hard to see it. It's being done, a little bit more, out of the public eye, if you will. But our plan will bring us to that point through the decade. So we've got a couple more years of engineering regulatory approval, and then we're really starting to engage and build out a supply chain. That supply chain really needs to come together in the next couple of years, such that our construction really leads through a fabrication facility starting in 2026, and then construction in earnest at the site starting in 2027, and getting the unit built, and then into testing and commissioning, commercial operation by the end of the decade. So there's a lot of work there. While we are in this regulatory engineering space, to make sure that our supply chain is robust and that it's ready for this nuclear construction.
So can you tell us a little bit maybe about, and I'll ask you this as well, Erin. Yeah, we're all about jobs, jobs for our members, and we have a lot of workers in oil and gas, and we're a little bit nervous about losing those jobs. And as we transition to these new technologies, what are the employment possibilities for building trades with ARC Energy and Moltex?
Well, we are actually working collaboratively for that supply chain engagement in the province of New Brunswick, but it will be really a pan-Canadian approach. And if you look at the scope of what we propose to do, what Moltex is engaged in, there's thousands of jobs that we expect right in the province of New Brunswick, upwards of 10,000, 11,000 direct employment. The part of the other thing that I would describe there is that while you talk about the first 4 units at the Labbe site, we do look to build multiple units, over the course of many decades. So between 2030, 2040, it's probably a unit per year. From 2040 to 2050, it's multiple units per year. So it's really a slow development of that supply chain relatively into a bigger book of business across Canada. It's a very exciting time.
Right. And that number, Erin, 11,000, that includes Moltex and ARC?
Yeah.
All right. It's not 11,000 each.
No,
We'd be okay with
that was a
but-
study that we did a little while back, and that actually, I think that only looks at like 10 years worth.
First.
That only looks at the first 10 years, but I mean, these reactors are built to last 60 years.
Right.
I would pretty much echo what Bill said in terms of the numbers. There are going to be plant jobs. There'll probably be about 200 to 300 jobs at the plant itself, but that's not really where the real opportunity is. The real opportunity is within the supply chain. That's where you're going to get thousands of jobs, and that's if all we ever do is build one reactor. The goal at Moltex as well is for a fleet rollout. There's enough spent can-do fuel in Canada to power 20 300 megawatt reactors, and that's just Canada. And the States, it's 5 times that, and then there's internationally as well. So, then you're looking at thousands of plant jobs and tens of thousands of supply chain jobs, and so that's really where the opportunity is going to be.
That's very exciting. And maybe we'll go to our first poll question. We'll ask the audience if you can open up your app. You've got a little bit of a flavor of the job creation that would occur with the development of SMRs. And the question we'd like to ask you is, are you excited about the work opportunities SMRs will create for your members? Yes, no, need more information. So while we're going to go live, okay, that's fine. Yes. All right. You guys have done an excellent job, so we'll look forward to going to work for you.
I think the other important point, Sean, is that when we look at sort of this just transition, there's talk about transitioning people to cleaner energy sources, and a lot of the times there's a big learning curve. You're going to take someone that worked in a coal plant and suddenly teach them how to install solar panels. That's a completely different job, But a reactor is a plant, and it works like any other fossil fuel plant. And so the learning curve actually isn't that great. So it's a much easier transition than some of these other clean energy, new technologies, if you will.
That's a good point. And go ahead, Bill.
I was just going to say one other thing to add on to what Erin was describing is that we've perhaps considered nuclear facilities as a big piece of making electricity, and the balance of plant is really tied to the grid. But with these advanced SMRs, we really do look at industrial market. So it's important to know that while the units will be tied, some units will be tied to the grid, making electricity, they have capability to vary their output at a very rapid rate, integrating with renewables, the wind, solar, quite well. The other part of it, I do see it as kind of a marketplace that is just as large, if not larger, than the electric grid component, is really industrial use. So these units, these advanced SMRs make steam at a higher temperature, higher pressure. It's superheated steam that can be used for other applications. And so it's very important to know that that industrial use, while it's good for for making water. And that steam can be deployed in different ways. And one of the ways that we think is a good place for Canada to decarbon its energy infrastructure is really in the oil sands market. And so the use of that high temperature, high pressure steam created without burning of fossil fuels can be used to extract oil sands in a very clean sort of way. Right. And that's a good marketplace for us to participate in. And then the other way is making ammonia, which is a clean burning fuel source. So the other, not necessarily in Canada, but certainly needed across the globe, is making clean water. Very intensive energy use, and we can support that also. So it's a plethora of opportunities of where these types of units can be deployed.
And what about hydrogen?
So hydrogen, we do see that as a good marketplace. Very strong. We do have a very strong opportunity in the province of New Brunswick to make hydrogen. And the way that comes out is it's a steam, electricity combination using electrolysis to make ammonia. So that's a nitrogen-hydrogen molecule. And then the good part about ammonia is it's easy to store, handle, ship. It's a good fuel source that can be moved about, if you will. And then at the point of use, you pull off one of those hydrogen atoms, and then you can turn that into a clean burning fuel source. So it's really ammonia first, and then hydrogen second, and then using that hydrogen for those heavy industrial applications around making steel, concrete, lime. Those processes at the high energy end can use that hydrogen like you would natural gas or coal, but it brings that heat that it's needed to make that process work.
Oh, great. Well, you know, my grade 12 chemistry teacher would be proud because I pretty well understood what you said there. But I think that's, part of the discussion is, how small modular reactors, nuclear energy, but also the byproducts, and how those byproducts can be synthesized and manipulated, organically to create fuels of the future. And I don't think a lot of people think about that, because there's a hydrogen market developing in the world.
Very strong hydrogen market in Canada, in Europe, particularly looking for, sources of that hydrogen. And so that's where that ammonia can be moved about, shipped, it's easily to shipped and then trucked to that point of use and then turned into that hydrogen. And it's really as we talk about the energy transition, these are ways that, not contemplated before, where a nuclear unit is connected to the grid, providing that base load, where we can really provide that energy transition has been discussed at this conference. So it's really an exciting time.
It is exciting. And Erin, both you and Bill and your respective companies, you're in New Brunswick. Everyone here from New Brunswick understands why you're in New Brunswick, but explain it to the rest. Like, why New Brunswick?
The obvious answer for us is that our particular technology needs spent fuel. So we need to be somewhere that has stores of spent fuel to power our reactor. So that was the obvious choice. So Point Lepreau in that case, and Ontario will be the next logical market for us. For right now, those are the only markets. In the future, as SMRs roll out across the country, we could very easily be the second or third or fourth or fifth of the kind, because we could take their fuel, recycle it, and produce clean energy. That was the main reason for New Brunswick. The other thing is that they've been running a reactor there successfully for the past 40 years. They have the knowledge, the expertise, and they have the public support. And that's really a big one. When you come in fresh somewhere, you have to build that public support, because there is just this inherent fear of nuclear, and so they've for the most part overcome that and come to realize that it is actually one of the safest energy sources, that it does offer clean air benefits, economic benefits. So that heavy lifting was sort of already done for us. And the other thing is that there's tremendous political support. The energy minister in New Brunswick is in his own words, all in when it comes to new small modular reactors. Very supportive, very vocal, and is sort of rallying political support. And this is a mega project at the same time, right? It has to withstand changes in government, and we have bipartisan support in New Brunswick. It's a conservative government now, but if the pendulum swings and we end up electing a Liberal government, we're confident that support will continue. So there's a lot of reasons why New Brunswick. They're sort of a small province, but they're mighty, and they've got a lot of. They're very keen, and so it's it just for a lot of reasons it made good sense for us.
Well, Building Trades, New Brunswick Building Trades built Point Lepreau, so we're certainly looking forward to building the small modular reactors as well. Anything you'd like to add to that, Bill, in terms of New Brunswick?
Well, no, I couldn't agree more with what Erin described. The province, the government of New Brunswick, very supportive. The energy minister, very engaged. And then it really ties back to that Stream 2, the alignment in the nuclear industry with MB Power picking up the role of leading Stream 2. And then the 4 provincial MOU is really the collaboration to roll it out across multiple provinces. So while we start in New Brunswick, the MOU exists to help for deployment across the 4 provinces and perhaps even more.
Okay, great. And so in the MOU, different provinces at various stages. OPG could be with us today due to illness, so they send their regrets. We heard about New Brunswick, Sask Power, Alberta. So where's Saskatchewan and Alberta in the development process for the SMR?
I'll start and then Erin can add to it. Saskatchewan, they have an electrical load growth and need for about 1.2 gigawatts, 600 megawatts of which would be dedicated. Actually, I'm trying to think if it's been made public or not, but they're going through a down select process for that first deployment of 600 megawatts.
Okay.
And then they'll look at the next 600 megawatts about how they will fill that need. And then in their interest really lies in a combination of electricity and industrial use. So we're really excited about that part of it.
So they started an RFP process for an SMR proponent?
So they, the way I would describe it is in the next year, that will probably be something that's rolled out.
Okay.
It's very near future.
Okay, great, okay.
And I would just say for Alberta market, they know where they need to be by 2050, and then there's some benchmarks between now and then, and the industries there are contemplating different solutions to how they can do that. And I think over the last couple of years, they've made good progress becoming more familiar with a nuclear sort of solution, and that I think in this year and next year, they will come to decision making around how they solve that problem. Okay. So we're really encouraged about being able to meet that need.
So is Moltex speaking with the Alberta government, the Saskatchewan governments as well, or are you mostly focused on your...
not yet.
Right.
It's a little, because, where our reactor runs on spent fuel. They don't have spent fuel yet.
Right.
So, the Alberta government, they're going to be looking at, most likely, they might be interested in grid scale power, but most likely their interest lies in SMRs to power the oil sands. Right. There's a lot of... I'm preaching to the choir, but there's a lot of efforts going into cleaning up oil sands production, and this is a very viable solution. But there's nothing to say we wouldn't come in next and take that spent fuel, recycle it, and reduce the stockpiles. What's interesting about Saskatchewan is, they are also where we mine uranium.
Yeah.
So the concept, at least for where Saskatchewan is concerned, of kind of having this full closed loop cycle within the province, I would imagine is very attractive, right? Mine the uranium, burn it, and you've got this closed loop cycle, and not necessarily financially or energy dependent on anyone else. They will likely be, they won't be building the first reactor, they'll probably be building the next reactor. Ontario and MB Power are going to be the first movers in this space. Saskatchewan will probably follow shortly thereafter.
Okay. So we're coming to the end. We got a few minutes left. We have another poll question. If I could just find it on here. For the audience, if you get out your app, would you be interested in a more detailed information session on SMR technology and the future of the industry? So Moltex, OPG, and ARC have graciously agreed to facilitate further discussions through CBTU's office with provincial councils or affiliated unions. And if you're interested in that, overwhelmingly interested in that. So I think you really have a group here that's really interested in learning more about SMRs and the technology, the application, and the work possibilities for building trades members as well. As you know, as we're getting to our close, and thanks everyone for participating in that app question. That's really, really helpful. In the recent budget, there was $120 million, $121 million over 5 years from NRCan to undertake research to minimize waste generated from these reactors, support the creation of a fuel supply chain, strengthen international nuclear cooperation agreements, and enhance domestic safety and security policies and practices. Is the federal government doing enough to support the advancements of SMR technology and really provide Canada with a leading position on SMRs internationally?
So, I mean, Canada has been a leader in the SMR space. There's no doubt, you know, between the roadmap and the action plan, you know, we're seeing nuclear included more and more in policy documents and climate emissions commitments. The recent climate emissions plan came out, big role for nuclear. You know, the Moltex was successful last year in raising $50.5 million from the federal government. You know, I think that's a strong a sign as any that they are very much committed to seeing this technology to fruition. You know, are they doing enough? It's hard to say. It's sort of a relative question. If there was one thing I think, you know, we could do a little bit better on, I'd like to see consistent inclusion of nuclear energy in policy documents. I think sometimes, you know, it's included, it's not included, it's clean, it's not clean. It is clean, and you know, it is non-emitting, and the industry will benefit from consistent inclusion of nuclear in clean documents. It'll open up funding, it'll give investors confidence, and it will just overall do the industry good. So that's one area where, you know, we could afford to see a bit of improvement. But overall, you know, the government has been very supportive, and they have, you know, the proof is in the pudding. We're seeing that more and more. We saw it in the budget for the first time, I dare to say ever, so things are heading in the right direction.
Great, excellent.
Sean, I just add to that, you know, I think what we're seeing in Canada this year, last year, and perhaps into next year, is really that coalescence around that broader support across many ministries and the federal government approach, aligning with the provincial approach and really trying to enable this technology to move forward quickly. I think you're also seeing that sort of broader approach. UK in the last couple of months have come out with a very strong statement of supporting nuclear, and same in the EU. Is that starting to come together too? Canada has been at, I would say, the pole position. They've had a very strong leadership back to the 2017, 2018 roadmap and vision, and what we need to do is just continue to accelerate that over the next couple of years so that it maintains its leadership role.
Well, Erin, Bill, we knew the half hour would go by real quick, and it did. So thank you very much, and we certainly look forward to building SMRs and making sure Canada remains a leader in SMR technology internationally. Please, a round of applause for our panelists.